Hello and welcome to today's Fpwebinar. It is The Cloud Has Arrived. Are you prepared for the storm? I'm Bill Newton, one of the marketing associates here at Fpweb.net, and with me today is Brad Gleeson, our VP of Client Development. Thanks for joining me, Brad.
Thanks for having me.
So, today's agenda, there's a picture of Brad in case you don't know what he looks like. And today's agenda will be the 3 unprecedented IT challenges that have converged to create the perfect storm in 2017. So we're gonna explore those 3 challenges and how they all fit together into this perfect storm. We'll take some questions, and then of course we'll give away a $50 Amazon gift card to one lucky participant. So let's hop right in and talk about the first challenge of this perfect storm would be the unprecedented migration to the cloud. Brad, could you just kind of break down what the cloud is, what the different kinds are?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people are familiar with the mass migration to the cloud at this point. And that really consists of 2 things, the private cloud and the public cloud. So those are the main types of clouds, if you will. On-prem could technically be a private cloud. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these topics here coming up.
Absolutely. So if you look at the screen, what we've got up there is kind of some scales on what's good and what's bad, and what's kind of in the middle there between the 3. And as you can see, the public cloud strengths are the ease of use, the initial price, and scalability.
Absolutely. So the reason why there is a mass migration to the cloud is because of the public cloud, and folks have been sold on the fact that it is highly scalable, which it absolutely is. The affordability is something that let's say a lot of CFOs have jumped at, executive level folks have jumped at because of what the perceived affordability is with the public cloud. And of course, we talked about ease of use, but scalability as well. Scalability, you have those things all built in for the public cloud.
Could you give me some examples of what fits well in a public cloud versus private?
Yeah. So in our estimation, things like simple websites, unsecure email. This would include Google and or Outlook. Simple file storage for non-critical documents. These are going to be things that are really the sweet spot, I think, for public cloud. Now I'm not saying that those are the only things that will work in public cloud, but there's just other things that you're going to have to be aware of in regards to the cloud as well. So we'll get into those here in a bit. Some examples of what does well in the private cloud is large secure websites, secure storage of documents, dedicated servers, highly available servers, and of course backup and DR solutions.
Okay, so good. So you kind of touched on what you're seeing on the screen in terms of strengths of the private cloud there. Security, compliance, and support.
Correct. Support's a big one. A lot of folks are running into this issue right now because support, even if you have internal support, I think the big jump initially was, CFOs, executive staff have made the assumption that if they can do it on-prem, they can do it in the cloud, and that might not necessarily be true of an internal IT department.
Indeed. What about the difference between, because when we talk about a private cloud, that could technically include on-premises, right?
Absolutely. So I think we need to touch a little bit on some of the differences between, on-prem and what a true private cloud is as well. So on-prem, everybody understands, they probably had that that place in the basement or that closet that was used at one point in time for on-prem. And overall, people will know that the typical hang-ups are going to be scalability. It wasn't easily scalable. The infrastructure may have been problematic. The platforms could also be a potential problem as well, and security. So these are all things that people are well aware of, having on-prem hardware. Those challenges, I'm sure they have faced at some point in time.
Yeah, good point. Tell us an example of some of the security issues with being on premises.
It's interesting because we had a large health provider here in St. Louis who actually had a server physically taken out of their on-prem site. And with HIPAA regulations and compliance issues today, that's a big no-no. I mean, those kinds of things just cannot happen. So those are the kinds of things that are faced, and that's just the security aspect of it. There's redundancy issues, cooling, power, all of these different things that play into it as well. And so from a compliance standpoint, as well as a security standpoint, these are things that are causing problems for on-prem. Then when you move on from on-prem to the private cloud, there's a lot of benefits as far as that's concerned. There are the speed that work can actually get done.
Yeah.
There's also security. Security is one of the biggest issues that faces IT departments. As a matter of fact, I think there was a quote somewhere about the two biggest things that IT folks get released from their duties for is security and compliance.
That's right.
Issues.
Yeah. There was just an article last week in the Wall Street Journal about that. It was citing a survey from TrustWave that said the top two reasons that IT personnel get fired. Yeah. Compliance, security.
So these are things that from an on-prem standpoint versus a private cloud. There's a lot that can be done in the private cloud if you're choosing the right provider. But there's a lot of things that you have to know about that. So think of it as the public cloud is just that. It's public. So inherently there's going to be potential security, compliance, and also the other thing is you can also get into productivity issues as well. Okay. So those are things to keep in mind, and I'm sure we're going to touch base on a lot of these issues as we move forward today.
Yeah, when you talk about the different reasons why moving out of the on-premises environment become more secure, you start talking about the difference between capital expense and operational expense.
Right. So this is a model I'd like to talk about because I think there's still some confusion out in the marketplace regarding CapEx and OpEx. Capital expenses, this is the old way that CFOs like to handle technical expenses, hardware, because they could depreciate that value. So from an on-prem standpoint, they'd buy a server, they'd buy hardware, they'd store it on site, and then that capital expense could be deducted, and depreciated, over time or even that year. And so that's a lot of, that's back 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this was the preferred method because you could take those types of deductions. And of course, the equipment is very, very expensive. So that's part of the reason why, people did it that way. But things have changed. Yes. And people are now kind of moving things over towards liking the operating expense model. And the reason why is because with OpEx, it's controlled budget. Okay, they have a amount of funds that can actually they understand how much is coming in and going out on a monthly basis. And this is number one for CFOs today. This is what they're looking for, is predictable cash flow and what's coming in, what's going out on a month in, month out basis.
So, to recap on what you're talking about, you got the CapEx of purchasing and then maintaining and then, updating and then replacing all this expensive equipment.
Correct.
Or you could go with an operational expense of basically renting space in a state-of-the-art data center that includes a lot of that security and the redundancy and the power backup and all that comes with that rental payment.
Yeah, and the performance that comes with utilizing state-of-the-art equipment.
Okay.
So you have all of those things in an operational format, and those are things that are appealing to companies. And again, more than anything else, you get all of those things, but the other thing that you get is predictable monthly cost.
Good point. Okay. So when you talk about the ease of use in a public cloud and being able to spin that up instantly, and the initial price being low, but what really stands out though is that the meter's always running. Can you kind of
Right.
expand on that a little for me?
Sure. So it's not so much that, again, meter's running because it's a predictable, use on a monthly basis. But
Okay.
but part of the problem is, and I think this is where folks are just now, especially the enterprise accounts, are really starting to see this with an all-in type of mentality into the cloud. And when I say that, I mean to the public cloud. The problem is once you get there, if you want things to run like they ran prior to the migration to the cloud, that's going to cost extra. Okay. If you're going to the cloud, well, okay, great, love to have you, but you want security too. Well, you got to have that. Okay, you've got to have the you have to have that add-on as well. So and then you also understand that there's going to be potential compliance issues with the public cloud, and more than anything, it's when you start adding all of the things together, web parts, performance is a biggie, compliance, and security, and all of these things you start adding on, well, guess what? That bill is going to really start getting run up on a monthly basis. So it might be predictable, but also CFOs are going to find out the hard way that those monthly expenses are going to ultimately probably be more, in some cases much more, than they were in the beginning when they were either on-prem or using a different type of service provider.
Gotcha. Okay. So that kind of brings us to the second challenge of the three challenges that make up this perfect storm. So we've got the mass migration to the cloud. And so maybe you've moved your infrastructure and applications to the cloud, or maybe you're going to move your infrastructure and applications to the cloud. But who's going to manage that?
Right. So this is a big problem that a lot of folks are having. Again, this gets back to this assumption that was made that if they can do it in-house, they can do it in the cloud. And that's just not simply the case. A lot of IT staffs are currently burdened because of the budget cuts that have happened year after year. And so they're burdened with a smaller staff anyway, regardless. Moving to the cloud is also going to delay fixes. Okay, so that's also going to be a big problem with those, with that staff. It's going to burden that staff with more tickets, if you will, and then the response time is going to be longer as well. So, all of these things are going to compile and compound an already, smaller workforce availability. From a skill standpoint, it's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges when you're doing stuff from the cloud.
And so you can see, I did a quick search here on Indeed for a systems admin. So this is kind of a very particular position in the IT workforce. But already there's 52,240 job openings. So you can see the gap in the talent shortage there. I mean, that doesn't even take into account the 95,000 openings that I found when I put in software developer. I mean, we've seen some stats on security analysts that range from 500,000 to 500,000 by the time you get to the year 2020.
Right.
So it's a supply and demand gap. I mean, you look at Forbes' top 10 hardest jobs to fill in America, and right now IT workers is number 4 on that list. Yo has a Career Builder Talent Supply and Demand report, and it lists IT jobs as number 2 as the toughest to fill in 2017, with a 6-to-1 ratio of demand to supply.
Right. Right, and so this exacerbates the problem. It's hard to get those people when there's so much demand. 1 out of 52,240 jobs available for systems admin. It goes right on down the list. Admins, database administrators, developers, security. You're going to see a shortage in all of these types of qualified people, moving forward. So it's harder and harder to find the good ones. And even if you take the time to develop them yourself, sometimes it's hard keeping those folks.
Good point. And you're going to have to pay because of the shortage or the demand.
That's
correct.
This
is a quick search I did on salary.com. Once again, for a systems admin with benefits, and I'm considering that if it's a full-time employee, you're going to have to pay benefits.
Absolutely.
So it came in at $106,000 a year.
Right.
So you look at the same salary.com U.S. national average. I'm not saying, obviously it's going to be more in Silicon Valley and a little bit less maybe in the Midwest, but national average, then for a DBA, it's $119,000 a year.
Correct.
software developer, $143,000 a year. And for a data security analyst, we're talking $160,000 a year.
Right. So this again goes to the lack of how many folks are truly out there available and the demand that there is for qualified people. And again, these numbers that you're hearing and seeing about at this point, again, it's based on total compensation, right? So it's not just the base salary, it's also all of those benefits as well. And that's a fair apples to apples.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So then, like Brad mentioned earlier, you go to the problem of searching for this talent and interviewing them and then hiring them, the onboarding and training to get them up to speed with the particular flavor of your business.
Right.
But now you got to hang on to them because they've got a target on their back.
Right. So anybody that's had IT departments in the past, they know that this is a problem. And the reason why it's a big problem is because if you've got good people, and hopefully you do, those good people are hard to keep because they do have that target on their back. There's so many different headhunters and recruiters out there now for IT because the demand is so built up that good people are hard to keep because that person typically goes to the highest bidder. And so it's hard to hang on. We see a lot of job hopping in the industry.
Yep.
So it's a frustrating, if you're head of that IT department, it's a frustrating landscape.
Absolutely. So you can see how even if you are growing your IT staff from within, maybe training someone that was hired to do something different and is now in charge of IT, that still makes them more recruitable to the poachers.
That's correct.
But it also gives you a situation now where this brings up our third challenge in our perfect storm, is that staff is unwilling or unable to evolve.
Right. So that's another thing that we're seeing a lot of in the workforce today is that you have an aging or maturing workforce, and what's happening as a result of that is they know what they know.
Okay.
They really, a lot of folks are in the engineering community resistant to learning new things at this point of their careers. So that's also having a dramatic effect on the job pool.
Yep. Because
these people are good at what they do, but because things are evolving at such a rapid pace, if you don't have a workforce that's keeping up with that, that's also going to be another issue regarding trying to maintain a good workforce internally.
Yeah, and Brad mentioned earlier, it's easy to, maybe for a CFO or someone to say, well, if I had this talented staff already managing my environment on premises, why can't they just turn around and do that in the cloud? And so this picture I've put up on the screen is a little tongue-in-cheek, but it demonstrates that maybe they just don't have the capacity to perform with the modern equipment.
Yeah, they may want to, but they just don't know how yet, and so it's just not that intuitive. And this is part of the problem. Again, coming back to the people, we already have this shortage, so it's already a drought, and all of these things compound the work environment. It's like turning up the temperature in a drought situation to 106 degrees. It further exacerbates the work pool, and again, it stresses IT departments to the breaking point.
That's a good point. In the last report from the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and not to say that our federal government's the best measuring stick for IT in the private workplace, but for an example, this report revealed that 75% of the federal government's existing IT is on legacy systems. So you can see that it'd be hard for a great deal of the workforce to adjust to working on such from such old systems.
Sure. So even if you make the jump from public sector to private sector and say it's only 50%, that's still a big number that's out there. And of course, with legacy systems, by definition, more things are going to go wrong. Things are going to break at a more rapid pace. And so then when you have a stressed workforce trying to keep up with the load, again, you've got situations that there's no way that team could be free to innovate for that company while they're taking care of all these day-to-day tasks.
That's good. That's a good point. So as you can see, the perfect storm here. These three IT challenges in terms of the mass migration to the cloud, who's going to manage it, and then the staff unwilling to evolve. That's converged to form that perfect IT storm in 2017. And that crisis is really about modernizing IT staff.
I would say the expense too, because this comes back to, again, folks will realize that there is a definite expense to doing things the way that they're used to in the cloud. So that expense actually could be bigger than the expense that they were already experienced prior to budget slashes. So again, how do you overcome that as an IT department?
That's a good point. Well, and we've talked to several organizations lately that have moved everything to the cloud, to cut costs. But their IT staffs are unable to modernize with the infrastructure and are not efficiently or not effectively managing or maintaining that environment now.
Right. So these are all going to be problems that the IT department's going to hear about sooner or later, right?
Okay.
And then it will finally make its way back up to the executive level, because when these IT departments cannot perform, you're going to lose productivity as a result in the workplace, and that's when it gets back up to the executive level. And so people will really start thinking about an all-in type of strategy. We really believe it's going to be a cloud plus one or hybrid solution that's going to work best for people in the long run, because people are going to have things that they're not going to either want in the cloud from a security or compliance standpoint. There's going to be things that aren't going to work as well in the cloud, especially from a cost efficiency standpoint. So those are going to be things that are going to have to be addressed, and it will finally all come back to the IT department to make that move that makes the most sense, so that there's balance between being as cost efficient as possible, but also having all of the productivity that's needed to keep the company moving forward.
That's exactly it. So it becomes a unique situation for pretty much every single use case.
Absolutely.
So, I would like to shamelessly plug that you're available for a short consultation to discuss those unique needs.
Right. This is our shameless 20-second commercial here inside of our webinar. But we want to make sure that people know, look, no matter where you're at in your maturation regarding a cloud migration, or where your roadmap stands at this point, we want to have the opportunity to be able to at least talk to you and understand a little bit more about what you're trying to do. And if for nothing else, we could give you some free education regarding a moving forward strategy to be able to best fit your unique needs.
And so you can reach Brad at sales@Fpweb.net, or give us a call at 866-780-4678. And if I can make out this little button to open up some of these questions. Let's see, this first one's pretty good. It says, what's the difference between AWS and Azure? Because I don't know if there's a great deal of difference, but there's got to be some differentiators, right?
Yeah, so there is one big differentiator. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about this, and that's the infrastructure as a service platform, or I'm sorry, infrastructure as a service. And you're going to see that with Amazon. Okay, so that's more inherent to Amazon, going that direction. Or if you're looking at for platform as a service, that's going to guide you a little bit more towards Azure. Okay. Now, there's one other player that we don't have mentioned here, but it's worth noting. Google is going to be there and that's really storage as a service. Okay, so this is kind of how you would think of the public cloud setting as far as what the differentiators are between Amazon and Azure at this point.
Okay, that's good. Here's one that seems pretty timely. It says, it looks like the current White House administration has shrunk the foreign worker pool for the U.S. How will that affect the IT talent shortage you're talking about?
Well, this is the thing. This is a big issue that's coming up, and it has to do with President Trump and the potential to limit the amount of visas for people working here in the country. And there was a time when we could have increased people were lobbying, like Bill Gates lobbying for to have an increased amount of visas, because we simply just don't have the qualified work pool here in the United States to be able to handle the demand. So now it could even potentially be worse, meaning not only could those visas be there might not be as many, so that could cause additional problems. So that only exacerbates the whole talent pool issue that we've already documented in this webinar.
Okay. Let's see. Looks like we got one more. My staff is so busy doing help desk requests that they can't ever get to the larger projects. How can we take on a move to the cloud as well?
So in my mind, how you would do something like that is find a good quality service provider that could help you with potentially a subscription service where they could do that admin work to do that help desk for you. And as a result of doing that help desk, that they could also potentially be leveraged to help actually even do the migration as well if you're doing a hybrid solution or a +1. Whatever your situation is, I think having somebody reliable to be able to manage that solution wherever your environment lives is going to be critical to your company's success.
And that's a good point. So we've talked about taking the day-to-day off the plate so that you can concentrate on those bigger projects. But you could easily flip that too and look at it like if you could get some help with the day-to-day. I mean, with the larger projects, the migrations, more of the database and development work, then you would be able to assist the rest of your workforce in responding to those help desk requests quicker.
Yeah.
So that they can concentrate on their business.
Yeah, two things. Number one, it helps free those internal people to innovate for your company. But there's also an SLA issue too. So right. For a company like ours, in the private cloud, you can expect a 6-minute SLA. Okay, that response time is documented and it's US based here with Fpweb. But if you're looking for a response, something in the cloud is typically going to be something along the lines of 30 minutes, and on-prem could be as much as 45. So it depends on the scenario and what the issues actually are. But understanding that getting those tickets responded to and getting them done quick, that's what makes the IT department hum. So if your IT department's not on those same types of response times, again, looking at managed services and freeing up those people to innovate might be a direction you want to consider.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to email a link of this recording here in a few hours, and then that email will also include a link to the registration page for our next FP webinar. Brad will be back on Valentine's Day, that's February 14th, 1 o'clock p.m. Central Time, with one of our SharePoint experts to discuss what's new with SharePoint 2016. So hopefully you can join us for that one. And I think it's time to announce our winner. If I did miss any of the questions, I'll definitely get to those offline and make sure we answer all of them. But I don't see any more in the queue at this time. So let's just pull somebody at random here off the list. How about Scott Fairs? Congratulations, Scott.
Scott, congratulations.
Everybody, thanks for joining.